But when you're eating good food over there, it just shows you like how healthy that food is versus the US, and just taking those little things and then bringing that back and starting to be like, okay, like am I actually eating the right things? What actually is in this food? Like what do I need to be, how is my health? How are all those things? And just taking that and trying the different foods, experiences, just everything over in the different countries, because it teaches you something. And, like we were talking about earlier, it just starts to compound and you start to see life in a different way. And it just opens your eyes a lot. So, no, I, I love that feedback and wiseness you've gained just from going to over 100 countries and places like that. Welcome to another episode of World Travel Made Easy with Itinerary Boss. I'm your host, Ross Alcorn, and I'm excited to dive into another episode this week with a special guest, RC Hand. RC is an expert in the field, and he's written a few books. He's based out of California. We got the chance to connect, and I'm really excited for him. He's a well-traveled guy, and excited for him just to share a lot of value with you today. Hey, RC, how's it going today?
Great, great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, yeah, of course. And I know our listeners a lot of times want to find out right off the bat, what value and useful information can they learn from this episode. So would just love to hear a little bit more about, how you help teach others about travel from your experience.
Well, I think the most important thing to know is that it doesn't have to be expensive to travel. You can go on an expensive trip if you want, but you can go on lots of trips that are less expensive and see more of the world.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, no, no, great point. And excited to dive into that. And that's one of the main reasons I like to do this is sharing my expertise and, over the years being able to find out how to help people travel within different budgets, whether they're going on their first trip across the US, going on their first international trip, whether they're using different strategies, using points, credit cards, any sort of transferring over to hotels, airlines. There's so many different ways, and you can make it affordable, whether you're a newer travel, hostels, going through travel portals, being a rewards member at hotels, airlines. So, no, I couldn't agree more with you there.
Yeah, in the beginning, my wife and I, when we first got married and first started traveling, we didn't have the resources that we have now. So obviously, you look for things that are more encompassing and less expensive and get more bang for your buck.
Yeah, yeah, and I feel like that's how I started. That's how most people start is like, okay, how can I get over there and do the most with the limited amount of time I have with PTO? And that just like anything, I think you and I were talking in the first in our prep call just around investing, like that just gets the clock rolling. And then from there it starts to compound over time. You start to learn what to do, what not to do, how you wasted money on some of those things, why you should book your flights early so you're not stuck in a middle seat or a window. If you like aisles, right? Making sure you have the right eye mask, pillows if you're doing an overnight, why you shouldn't, I think now we're well traveled where you shouldn't bring two, three check bags over to over to Europe and have a lot of outfits. Usually those can be wasteful. So yeah, I think there's a lot of different strategies and you got to start somewhere. So would love to hear just a little bit more about, your background of, you talked a little bit about how you got started, but just, the overall story there.
Well, my wife, her father came from London, so she traveled quite often to London as a teenager to visit family, and she went on to school to be a travel agent. And her mother's brothers, three of them were tour guides for Globus in Asia, Europe, and America. So she came from a family with a pretty good travel history, and her family were also immigrants. She's the second generation American, so her mother and her father was from London. Her mother was born in the States, but their grandparents were all immigrants. So they had a closer connection with the rest of the world, perhaps, than a lot of us do. And I grew up in a family that was self-employed. We didn't have time to travel. We were just kind of scraping by. And as time passed, and my wife and I got married, we talked a lot before we got married, and what travel was one of the main things we wanted to do. I had a son from a previous marriage, and so we weren't going to be raising a young family. We've been married 40 years now. I'm 73 in February. And so our lives were mostly about working and planning for our trips in the future, but we traveled every year. We made sure we took a group tour somewhere, a moderately priced group tour. And we liked the bus tours through Europe and through Asia with a docent. So you see things and learn what they are rather than just taking a driving through Europe and looking at things and not really knowing what you're looking at. And of course, if you're driving, you're watching the road, it's hard to see a lot of things that a tourist would be interested in. So we used to find the camaraderie of a bus tour a lot of fun and the ability to learn things in the process of traveling.
No, that's awesome, and I think it's pretty cool that you started right off the bat when you got married and said, "Hey, this is important to us." You prioritized going on that one trip, and you found what you liked and really what you wanted to do to map out the trip specifically for that reason. And that's one area that I always try to when people are starting to travel or they've done it a little bit and they're like, oh, well, I don't know where I want to go. I see this on social media. And, at the end of the day, it's like figuring out, starting just with simple, what do you like to do? How much time do you have? What's your budget? What have you liked when you've gone on vacation? What haven't you liked? Are you more of you want to go around a big city or are you want to go to a hidden gem and relax? And find, are you interested in history? So exactly what you just said aligns with, how I try to help people, educate them. And no, I love that story. Where have you guys gone over the years? Be interested to hear, on those bus tours to Europe and in Asia.
Well, we've been to 100 countries, all seven continents, and we've been to North Korea. So we've been to a few places. I write historical fiction, so I'm interested in fiction and I love to see historical places. My wife is an avid reader, as I am, and we love history. So we try to hit the high points of these countries with the history. We wanted to go to all the communist countries and see how they did things. We did that. We've been to Cuba and Eastern Europe and Russia, Berlin with the fall of the wall. We were there for I believe it was the 20th anniversary of the fall of the wall, which was a big party. Uh, We've been to 8 countries in Africa. We've been to the five stands. We've been to India 3 times. We went to China in 1995 when it was just opening up. We took our son, who was 15 at the time, all through Asia, Thailand, uh, Indonesia. And so we saw a lot of interesting things. We want to see everything. We want to
Yeah.
go everywhere.
Yeah, no, that's you got a long list. I'm jealous. I'm nowhere near that, but I got some years to do it. I'm excited. We're going to
Absolutely.
we're going to Thailand and Bali in April, which and Indonesia. So we're excited for that. Is there anywhere that really, and well, let me take a step back before I say talk about that. I think it's pretty interesting too that you went to a lot of those countries now that people can't really travel to. You mentioned like North Korea, when you talked about Russia, like a lot of people aren't going there. When did you go there? And like, I guess, what was it like when you went there and why did you decide to go to some of those countries at the time?
We wanted to see how the communists run things because you hear a lot of people in America talking how about great communism and socialism is. My wife's family live in London, and of course that's a fairly socialist environment. We understand how that system works, and you need to go there to really see the truth of how quickly you can get medical care and what kind of medical care you get. I have friends that grew up in Canada, and they have the same horror stories about healthcare in Canada. So, traveling around the world, you see things from a much closer and more perhaps realistic viewpoint. We had a person on a trip to Bangladesh who fell and broke her arm. And when she went to the doctor gave her a list of things to buy at the pharmacy. She had to go to the pharmacy and buy the cloth and the plaster and the splint and come back to the doctor and have her arm set. That wouldn't necessarily happen here in the States anywhere, I don't think. But yeah, we have a wide variety of places that we wanted to go to. We just came back from we were in Egypt right after the war broke out. This recent war in Israel with the issues there. We had a trip planned for Iran next year. We've had to cancel that. We kept hoping that we would get to go, but things are a little dicey, so we're not going to Iran. It took us uh, tries to get to Egypt because every time we signed up to go to Egypt, something happened between them and Israel, and it was a little bit dangerous. And in fact, when we went to Egypt this time, they had to reroute our flight because there was some hostilities in the area, and we couldn't fly over a direct route. We had to be circumnavigated around it and miss the heat there. So we're up for some adventures. It's always fun for me to see how people react when things go south on a trip because you can let it ruin your trip or you can turn it into a small adventure. We were in Australia at one point many years ago, and the local airlines all went bankrupt at the same time. And we had our itinerary changed. We had to leave from Sydney out to the different locations rather than doing a circle around the country. We had to do like a spoke out to the edges of a wheel, and the X-ray machines broke down, and all kinds of things delayed our trip. And I set up a lottery, and we all sat down with a piece of paper, and we picked what time we thought the plane would leave. Rather than bitching and moaning about
Yeah.
the plane not leaving, we got some coffee and donuts, and we set up a lottery and kicked in some dough, and some gal ended up making $10 on the deal, and we all had a fun time and got to meet each other.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. No, that's a good way to look at it. And yeah, I mean, if you've traveled to that many countries, it's never there's always going to be issues, right? There's going to be something that goes on with the plane. There's going to be delays. You've been in kind of more serious, right? Going where there's wars, there's issues there, there's bankruptcies with flights. So it's interesting. And yeah, I think if you just walk through any airport, um, there's high stress levels, and it's
There's
and when things
opportunities for every there's opportunities for any number of things to happen.
yeah, yeah, no, exactly. Well said. Well said. Is there, I mean, you've been to so many. Are there specific places that really stick out that from the 100 countries you've been to?
Absolutely, a family. I think Nepal would be an excellent place to go to. We did a couple of weeks of trekking up there, and we saw how the children are integrated into the families. I grew up in a family that was self-employed. We had restaurants as when I was growing up, and all of us in the family had to go to work early in life. I had a shoe shine box. I sold flowers on the street corner. And these people in Nepal and these third world countries, the children are an integral part of the family. They willingly help around the farm and they love going to school, gives them a break from hard work, and they're actually interested in becoming educated, which is a nice change of pace. So I would recommend Nepal as a starting point, and anywhere in the Far East or the India or those areas. It's so different, and it will absolutely open your eyes to how other people live and make you aware that not everyone lives like we do. And every country, every culture does something well, and you can learn from every culture you travel to that if you go with open eyes and not with a chip on your shoulder, you might learn something.
Yeah, no, that's very well said. I had a recent guest who came on who he he spent some time just a month. He was over in Spain and he was talking about a when he was 16 and his first trip ever. They were high school boys and they were somewhere in Peru, and one of the counselors just said, "Be present. You know, you can't be don't quit thinking about the future, quit thinking about the past, just be present and enjoy where you're at and take something from it and learn something from it, and take those little things and memories and start to have those compound." And I think that's what you're talking about. It just relates to that, is being in the moment, understanding what other cultures bring, going there to learn too, and then bringing that back. Because I'll just give you a prime example. When we just went to Greece in September, like we went to Costa Rica in February, and we found out how they were, part of the blue zones, one of the blue zones. And then from there, we came back, watched the documentary, started, we're focused on, exercise, diet, all that, but then really dialed into that, which then led to when you go to, you go over to Europe and you're like, I bet if you tried a hamburger from McDonald's in Europe versus the US, it's going to be completely different. But when you're eating good food over there, it just shows you like how healthy that food is versus the US, and just taking those little things and then bringing that back and starting to be like, okay, like am I actually eating the right things? What actually is in this food? Like what do I need to be, how is my health? How are all those things? And just taking that and trying the different foods, experiences, just everything over in the different countries because it teaches you something. And, like we were talking about earlier, it just starts to compound and you start to see life in a different way. And it just opens your eyes a lot. So no, I, I love that feedback and wiseness you've gained just from going to over 100 countries and places like that.
Well, absolutely. And to be able to view your country through the eyes of others is an important thing. To watch foreign media discuss what America is up to and what America stands for. I'm fortunate that I speak Spanish fairly well. So when I travel to Spain or South America or Cuba, I can communicate well enough to get something to eat and stay out of jail. Um, we went to the Galapagos Islands in 2000, which was an interesting trip because of the Y2K issues. We were just about, we did a tour of, in Peru, we did a tour. We were the only people on the tour because everyone was afraid to travel during the Y2K problem. And so we had a guide, a bus, and my wife and I
That's
and
pretty
that
cool.
was wonderful. And of course, it wasn't that much more expensive, and we went. And likewise, in 2008, with the economic downturn, we did a trip to the Amazon, and we had a Amazon cruise. We went to Brazil and then went up to the Amazon, and we had a cruise for the Amazon. I believe there were 8 of us on the whole ship and they didn't cancel the ship. And I pulled up to the parking lot and it was very quiet. And I asked the lady in Spanish, I go, how many people are on the ship? And she said, 8. And I said, oh, you mean 80? And she said, no, ocho, 8.
Wow.
And I couldn't believe it. So they laid off half of the cleaning staff. They closed down the shop on the ship and off we went. There were more people in the dancing troupe that came on to dance for us one night than there were as guests on the ship. So we had a couple from Peru, a couple from Britain, a couple from France, and a couple from England, and my wife and I. And the fellow from France, the woman from Peru spoke Spanish. And so we were all able to communicate, although not always in English. We were able to communicate, had a great dinner, had told some travel stories, and had a wonderful time.
Do you feel like during those, no, that those stories are awesome. And the fact that you guys were like, hey, let's go travel during these times. Do you feel like when, during Y2K, during the financial crisis, during other times when other people like I'm not traveling, do you find that, well, are you getting good deals or are you going out and traveling because of that? Because you're like, hey, we can go do this, or like I guess what's your thought process behind that?
Well, one thing, my wife is Jewish, so we travel often during Christmas time overseas. And it's interesting to see other countries decked out in their Christmas finery. India, as an example, has a lot of Christmas culture, a lot of Christmas lights and things like that going on, which was surprising. My wife plans the trips, and of course, we look for trips that are within budget. We find that booking our own airfare saves a lot of money. A lot of these companies make their money by boosting up the airfare. So we book our own airfare. Our trip to Africa, the difference between the airfare, taking what they offered through the tour company and what we booked ourselves was we saved half at
Wow.
least on the airfare. Yes. So I would always ask people to look into the differences in the pricing on a local on your website for your tickets rather than automatically going along with your tour company. That's one way to save a big chunk of dough right there.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I mean, I think it's just, setting yourself up for success, planning ahead, right? If mapping out, I think it's, beginning end of 2024 going into 2025 as we're recording this. I think just planning out in 2025, like what does your schedule look like? Where do you want to go? How much time do you have off? Do you have some big things that are coming up? Is travel a priority? What type of trip do you want to go on? And then planning that versus getting halfway through the year and being like, oh man, everyone's going over to Europe this summer. Everyone's going here. Like maybe we should go. And then you look and it's too costly. I mean, that's where then it's just like, okay, maybe we'll do it next year. And I feel like that's the issue is everyone thinks it's too expensive, But at the end of the day, they just haven't done a lot of the research, right? And that's the goal of these types of conversations, to share a lot of that useful information of, traveling during those times. Also booking your own airfare, if spend a lot on credit cards, seeing what different just Black Friday, Cyber Monday, Travel Tuesday, there were deals and there were ways to get a lot of additional extra, spending, just based on, if you're familiar with Rakuten, they had cashback plugins that you can use, Capital One had within the portal. They had additional miles that you could get when you went through places like Viator or TripAdvisor, get your guide. So there's a lot of different ways that you can save, as well as maximize, right? Ways to get additional rewards, and then use that towards future travel. So really just mapping out what's your budget. Are you planning to pay with, cash? Are you planning to pay with different rewards? Are you part of some of those programs? And that's really what I try to help with. And also bringing on guests like yourself is just to share. There's so many different ways, and don't just take the lazy way out of like, oh, I'll just go to this and they're going to probably charge me additional fees. It's always like doing that research. It takes a little bit, but at the end of the day, it's going to save you time, money, and also make your trip stress free or less stressful.
Absolutely. We had a very good friend who was a travel agent, and if people connect with you and have a relationship with you, with like with us, he would contact us when prices dropped to places that he knew we wanted to go to. And back in the old days, we would fly to London for the weekend, and we could fly for $250 round trip to London at certain times of the year. And he would see that come up, and he would call us, and then my wife's family is in London, so that would give us a chance to fly over there. And you take a overnight bag, and we only travel with carry-on for the most part. We have travel clothing, it's lightweight travel clothing. You have to, after a time, you'll learn what to bring with you. You do always, people tend to overpack. We can travel for a week anywhere or a month anywhere with just a carry-on bag because we wear clothing that washes and dries overnight and the like. We don't have heavy big Levi's or shoes that are too heavy and clunky. Um, we uh, we went to the Galapagos Islands for the Millennium, and that was a very expensive trip. It was with a very high-end company, but that was a special time for us. It was the Millennium, and it was a special place to go to see the Galapagos Islands. And we've gone on other trips, like I said, for $250 to fly to London, and we have a certain hotel we stay in. It's not too expensive. It's got a great location on the Strand. We're big walkers, so we can walk to the palace from our hotel. And my wife is well versed in using the subway. And if you do go to any country that has a subway system, do some homework before you go and take advantage of that. It's much cheaper than using cabs. It's much quicker. And if you have a limited amount of time, using the mass transit systems are very helpful so you don't get stuck someplace in traffic and waste 2 hours of your trip when that 2 hours could be used in a museum or somewhere else. We do tend to go to a lot of museums. We like to see art exhibits. We were just in Japan. We did a cruise to Bali and to the Philippines this year, and spent a week in Osaka, Japan. They had an art showing there, and we have a Japanese brother and sister in Japan. We visit with their parents. They came over as exchange students, so we have friends in Japan, and we were there for the Cherry Blossom Festival.
That's
So that was lovely, and we did a tour of the Philippines. We did saw some things in between coming to Japan. So we like to pack those vacations fairly tightly. We went to the Olympics in Greece. If you're going to go to the Olympics, you may as well go when they're in Greece. It was the 100th anniversary of the modern Olympiads, and my wife broke her foot there the second day we arrived. She has some really cute shoes, ladies. Don't take cute shoes. Take good walking shoes. So she was able to wrap her foot. We had a person with us on the tour who was um, a coach and showed my wife how to wrap her foot properly so she could continue to walk. But a hint here, we carry beach shoes with us, those lightweight, waterproof walking shoes like scuba divers wear. We pack those, and if you hurt your foot, you can either slip-ons. You can walk in them. If your foot's too swollen, they stretch. They take this much room in a suitcase, And if you hurt your feet, you can. I actually hurt my feet in London. I had brought new shoes for a wedding, and I couldn't wear them the next day, so I wore my beach black walking shoes. They looked like Japanese sandals,
That's
and
hilarious.
I kid you not, if I hadn't had those, I couldn't have gone out. And the fun part was I was on the subway in London, and people were looking at my feet. They looked like Japanese ninja boots, and
That's
people were
funny.
wondering what in the heck did this guy have on his feet? But they made it possible for me to go out. If I hadn't brought those, I wouldn't have been able to go out walking. And I have to give my wife full credit for all of this because she, of course, as in most marriages, is the planner and the packer. And she's well traveled and she's taught me how to listen and follow directions.
That's funny. That is that you brought up a lot of good points, and I want to selfishly I want to talk a little bit more about Japan, but I think first just a couple points I want to highlight is bringing carry-ons versus checked is huge. We're the same way. We yeah, I mean we went to Greece for almost 2 weeks and in September, and we had four people who went, and everyone brought a carry-on just because you can pack lightweight shoes. You can pack if you're going somewhere that's, you can bring sandals, which are easy. You can bring water shoes, right? And then you can bring a pair of either white or black sneakers, something that goes well with every outfit.
Absolutely.
I think where it gets tough is when you go somewhere in the winter and you got to think about some of those heavier clothes. But there's ways to get strategic. But I think the one thing that I've learned over the years is, if you're staying in hotels, if you're staying at Airbnbs, if you're staying, through any of the sites, right? A lot of the times they will have either a washer and dryer in house, or they'll have laundry service, or you can find dry cleaning service that are pretty cheap.
Absolutely.
So doing that pre-research ahead, and yeah, the water shoes are that's a funny story and good lesson learned. Yeah, I mean, bringing those wherever you go, because a lot of the times if you're going to beaches in all over the world, it's rocky, and you're gonna want to have those versus going barefoot and getting injured. So yeah, I think that is very key, and something I wanted to touch on is you also aren't dealing with, if you have layovers, if you're traveling far away, if your bag gets lost and then all of your clothes are there, like what are you doing? So that's one of the biggest reasons that we're team carry on is for that reason. And half the time, you will, if you even bring one extra pair of clothes, like yeah, I even did it on Greece and I packed pretty well. It's like that one extra pair of shorts that I'm like, I only wore one time and I wore because I felt bad. So it's that I brought them. So it's just packing light, bringing athletic type clothes that you're going to walk around with that dries quick. And yeah, I mean, just thinking, can I pair this with another outfit? Can I also, you can rewear stuff, right? That's, you just wash it and rewear it. So definitely love those tips and strategies. Yeah, I'd be curious just because Japan's definitely up there on my list. So where have you been? You said you've been to Osaka. Are there other areas that you've been, and kind of walk me through that and what some of your favorite places are there?
Oh, sure. We've been in Tokyo. Let me say first of all that we watch Japanese television. If you have cable at home, you can get the NHK Japanese network, and they have great travel shows on there with English narration. And every week you can go to a lovely site in Japan and learn a great deal about their. They have a lot of festivals. You can learn about all their festivals and a lot of their history. There's a lot of documentaries. It's well worth watching, and most of it is in English. You can also get a lot of news on what's happening in Korea because the Japanese are focused on that. And the Japanese, because they have a pictorial language, their photographic sensibilities are highly developed. So when they film something, it's very artfully done. It's very enjoyable and well worth watching. NHK television. We traveled on the bullet train. We were actually in Japan when Yongsang Rikyo set off to sarin gas in the Tokyo train station.
Oh, cool.
We were passing through there when that happened. We didn't know it until the next day when we saw it on the news. Uh, we were we actually got caught up in Margaret Thatcher's motorcade in London on a bus tour at one point. Uh, and our driver talked to the police officer as they were guarding the road, and he indicated to the road was closed that we were supposed to go on. And our bus driver told him, "We're with them," and meaning Margaret Thatcher and her motorcade, and we were able to follow them and then get off the road and get to where we were wanting to go to. So In fact, the water shoes also, if you are a beach goer, I live at the beach. I live on the water. I'm not a big beach person because I'm spoiled. But when you travel to Tahiti or these places, you don't know what kind of those beaches aren't sand beaches like in Southern California or on the East Coast. A lot of them have a lot of brambles, a lot of growth. And in Tahiti, as an example, you have to walk out a long way through very rough surfaces to get into the deeper water. So having those water shoes with you will make it possible to do that. If we didn't have the water shoes with us, we wouldn't have been able to go out into the water. uh, One thing we did in Tahiti, we hired our waiter. We were there kind of in a slow season. We hired our waiter to be our tour guide, and he was able to get off from work. And he was a fellow with a very colorful disposition and personality, and everyone knew him. And he took us on tour for 2 days in the city to the market, to the museum, to all these places. So that was a one-off for us getting a local to be a tour guide. But there is that possibility if you put yourself out there and talk to people that you come into regular contact with. I write fiction novels that take place all over the world. I hand my card out everywhere I go, and I have people that I still correspond with from my trips. I'm still corresponding with my tuk-tuk driver from India 2 vacations ago. And I have a gentleman who works on a cruise ship in the Caribbean who lives in Africa, and he and I still correspond. I just got a email yesterday from a young man who is from Kenya, who is now in Poland, that we helped go to school. So we have a lot of connections around the world because of our traveling. And that grows our family and it grows our opportunity for local information. Our friend in India wrote me the other day, "Oh, hey, it's the Diwali festival right now. We're having a great time and blah blah blah." So it's fun to have people contacting us. In fact, here in Huntington Beach, we used to have a big festival for the what is it? In India, they have a festival for the fight between the water and the fire gods. And twice we've been in India that time of year, and everyone is throwing water balloons and dry watercolor paint at each other. And if you dare go outside, you will be covered in dry paint and water from water balloons. And that again, makes some fun in travel where the locals are coming up to the tourist and smearing paint all over your
Right.
face as you're going by in a rickshaw or a tuk-tuk. So be prepared. If you're lucky, these kind of things will happen to you rather than being away from the locals. Try to be immersed in that. And if you speak a foreign language, perhaps go to places where you're able to speak that language as a starting point to give you practice with the language and to really deeperly involve yourself deeper in the culture.
Yeah, no, that's one of our favorite things to do when we travel is just going and immersing ourselves in the local culture, eating the food, right? Walking through, just kind of seeing everything and also asking when we're going out to eat, like where's one of the best places to go that is like a staple here that's local that isn't going to be like a top rated right on the internet that only the locals know to go to. And a lot of the times if you're checking into a whether it's hotel, hostel, Airbnb, like, if you want to get a good reservation somewhere, like you should plan that in advance. But if you're somewhere for 4 or 5 days, maybe do 2 nights out at those places if they're like an experience that you have to do. And then when you're there, say, hey, I looked up some of these places. Would you recommend going here? Are there other places that you recommend? And a lot of the times they're going to say, yes, yes, no. If and then you can say, hey, this is kind of our style, this is what we like to do, and they'll give you local recommendations. They'll tell you to go talk to their friend or their brother or cousin who owns that down the road, and that's one of the best ways to do it. I personally think. What about when you're it seems like you and your wife travel to a lot of these amazing places, but also you're going at some of the best times when a lot is going on within that country, whether it's a festival, whether it's a holiday. Like, how are you finding out when those are, or how are you are and is that going to be more expensive during that time? I know it's a three-part question, but it'll kind of help the audience understand because I know they're thinking it. And then if it is expensive, how are you finding deals or planning for that?
Well, my wife is very astute at reading the travel section of the paper when there used to be a newspaper. So now she does it on the internet. Uh, so we do that, and again, watching a lot of travel programming on television and doing some reading. I like to read history, and so I'll find something that I find interesting, and that will pinpoint the location in a certain country. I have a website with a travel blog and my novels on it. It's called cowboyproductions52.com. I talk about different travel experiences. There's photographs there. I tell personal stories, travel stories. We've had some crazy, crazy travel stories happen to us. We've met people on the other side of the world who have relatives living nearby us. We've met people that we know while we're traveling who happen to be in the same location at the same time. The weirdest things happen, I'm sure it's happened to you too, but you can travel halfway around the world and bump into somebody that's on your bowling league at home. And that makes for a fun trip. My wife was in the US Navy for 7 years, and she lived in Italy for a year. So she had that opportunity to learn about Naples. And we've been to Italy 2 or 3 times and gone back to explore those areas and been to Pompeii and see the sights. And interestingly, of course, there are ruins all over the world. In where is it? In Morocco. Morocco has some of the best ancient Roman ruins in the world. And right there, and Morocco looks like Ireland in some areas along the Mediterranean. It's not all desert, it's beautiful and green. We were just, in Turkey has the great ruins at Ephesus. And we were just in, where were we? Gosh, I can't even tell you where it was, but it's the crossroads of the Silk Road. And they have great Roman ruins there with a big circus and all kinds of complete structures. So if you love, oh, it was we were just in Jordan. Jordan has the most wonderful Roman ruins you could ever imagine. And that place is one of the hilliest countries you'll ever go to. We were there during the war. We were there 6 days after the war started between Israel and the Palestinians. So we had a little bit of a issue there. We had to reroute a trip coming home from a sightseeing tour because there were some protesters clogging the freeway. But we went through some very narrow and old roads in a big bus, which was interesting. The hotels, of course, have a lot of security issues and coming in and out, but very wonderful people. The Jordanians and the Egyptians are wonderful people. They're very open and very hospitable. The traffic in Egypt is unbelievable, as it is in Vietnam. I recommend Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. Laos is still not highly developed. It's inexpensive to travel in. The food is wonderful. The hotels are wonderful. We don't travel very expensively. We can afford it now, but do cheaper trips and do more of them.
Yeah.
We do fly business class now because we can, and it's much more comfortable. We don't drink alcohol. We're not gourmets or gourmands. So we spend our money on locations, and again, we want to go everywhere. We've been to the five stands, which are wonderful Muslim countries, clean as a whistle, wonderful history, great vistas, wonderful people. I can't think of a place that I've been to that I regret going to.
That's awesome. No, I mean, you broke down, right? How do you do it and why do you travel that way? And I mean, it's true. You kind of have to make, you just mentioned, different sacrifices. If you want to stay in the five-star resort and you want to eat the gourmet meal, right? You may only go on one vacation. But if you say, hey, I want to go see different places, I want the experiences, and now you can fly, business class because it's more comfortable. But like you just have to figure out, right, what is it for people who are listening and wanting to travel more? What is it that you want to do, and how do you want to do it, and what's really most important to you? So no, those are really really good tips, and I know I'm going to take a lot of those for myself. I think it'd be good to, oh, go ahead.
Well, I'm just going to say, whatever you love, if you love art, if you love history, make that a part of the trip. You're going there. You may only go there once in your lifetime. Go to the Louvre, go to the British Museum, see
Mhm.
these things. And when you get there, there's more things there than you can ever imagine. And often there aren't very many people there during the day. You have the place to yourself because everyone else is working. However, we were just in Kenya And we went to the National Museum, and it was a holiday, and all the kids were there, which made it even more fun because the kids are running through there, raising the ruckus and having a great time. And we got to enjoy that also. So I think for those of us who love art and history, always make sure to have some time set aside for a decent museum somewhere.
Yeah, no, 100%. I'm curious too. I know you mentioned your website, cowboyproductions52.com. How how did that come about? The name Cowboy Productions.
Well, that's interesting. So I was self-employed my entire life. I learned the trades from my father. I'm a plasterer and tile setter, and we did a little bit of land development. And my father was a master of all trades, and we did all our own building, roofing, air conditioning, plumbing, electrical, everything. Uh, I used to tell my wife when I was burnout and sore, I worked 6 days a week for 38 years. I used to tell her I just want to be a cowboy because I'm worn out. I can't work anymore. And so that's where the cowboy comes from. And I was born in 1952. So I started my website as a diary of our trips. And it got so involved, and I do a lot of research. I don't do research before I go on a trip. I go on a trip blind, so to speak, and then see all the things that I see. And then when I come home, I do a deeper dive and do research and learn about the history in on a deeper level. And so I thought, well, I'm going to put this stuff up on my website for my own enjoyment. And then I decided to put it out into the world for other people to see. I have stories about my young childhood, which was very interesting. I grew up in a rough bar. I had a shoe shine box and I sold flowers on a street corner. My dad was an alcoholic, but he was a hard worker. He was a genius. We had a lot of interesting family adventures, both good and bad. And then I went into business for myself and never had a chance to travel or do much of anything. So I put these personal stories on my website. I've seen shootings and stabbings and riots and all kinds of things, but I also have stories about travel. We have certain philanthropic organizations that we discovered while we were traveling that we donate money to, like She Rose in India, which is an organization that helps women that have been burnt by their husbands and boyfriends with acid for any number of reasons. They run a restaurant in a couple of restaurants in India, and so I have information on there how you can help them. We help children around the world get educated. I have information on there about that. I'm on Instagram and Facebook at RC Hand, where you can see short videos of my recent trip to Africa. And I've done several podcasts. I do live readings of my stories, my books. I tell true stories on stage. So those videos are on Instagram and Facebook at RC Hand. So I'm trying to get out into the world and tell people my story. I'm just a working guy, didn't have any money, and just I bought my first house by recycling newspapers, bottles, and cans. And took us $3,000. Took us 3 years to save $3,000. We were able to buy a condo. So whatever it is in this world that you want, if you want it bad enough, it'll happen. You're the only one that's going to make it happen. Don't look on the left or the right. Look in the mirror. If you want to go and travel the world, you're going to do it, but you're going to have to do it on your own to make it happen.
Man, I don't know if I can ask another question. That was a great way to that's a great cherry on top. It's I think it's before, we wrap up. I think it's great what you're doing in India. That's amazing. Also the education around the world. Like and this is why I like to have this show is because I get to interview people like you. I get to learn from different parts of life, right? You're in Huntington Beach. I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina. Like, our paths wouldn't have crossed if we didn't have this. And I think
Right.
it is very so it's amazing to hear stories that you're talking about. I recently had a guest where you talk and one thing you called out was public transportation. Take public transportation. I had a guest on who he goes around the world and does videos and has a YouTube channel around transit unplugged of what is transportation look like in other countries and why is it so screwed up in the U.S. and just because when you're going over there and a lot of people who don't travel their first hesitation is well, what if I get over there and I don't know how to speak or read the language? Like what happened? Like how do I get around? What about this? What about that? So like sharing a lot of that, I would have never come across that if I didn't have this show. There's other people who have been, right, who have been to so many different countries and have so many different opportunities. Hey, I do these specific things to get to Antarctica where You don't have to take the ship, you take and go through the Drake Passage. There's actually a flight that goes direct, and you have this specific experience. And
Oh,
just
but you'd miss the Drake Passage.
yeah, yeah, that's true. That is true. But there's just so like just interviewing that and hearing about all these things just helps educate people, and it gives them really a portfolio of here's what's out there, right? You kind of have to pick and choose what is important to you, like you said, and what you like. Or do you like history? Do you like museums? Do you like just getting out and walking around? And I think that's something when I first started, it was, and still I like to plan what we're going to do when we get over there. But as I've gotten older and started doing it more, there's a lot more just, hey, let's walk around, enjoy it, right? We want to make sure we eat
Absolutely.
at like these two places, but other than that, like if we have to do like a tour that you have to do, right, when you go somewhere, because you like you said, you may not go back, but a lot of the time it's just getting there. There's a ton to do, a lot of free walking tours. And yeah, and just for people listening and people who are wanting to travel more, just focus on yourself, not what's super popular on social media, not what one person told you had to do. Like figure out what you like to do, and that's really what's going to help you and travel and travel more and continue to travel.
I have to say, one thing that I've learned through a lot of reading, geography is one of the most important things in the world. It determines the history and the future of countries. Most successful countries have a major port on a major river that goes into the interior of the country that makes trade easy. Africa does not have that. Africa has a very difficult geographical situation. They don't have mountains that catch snow where there's a large mass of snow that gives running water year round to certain areas. They have very few great seaports. They're very geographically deprived by their geographic situation. Their economic growth is hampered. So when people talk about politics, the geography comes before the politics. Look at how America is isolated. Look how close Europe is together. Look where the wars have been in history. Look where the issues have been in history. Geography plays a great part to that. And if you study a little history, a little geography before you go on a trip, that will make it more meaningful for you to understand perhaps what you're going to learn along the way.
I need to get a book on Thailand and Bali before we go there, and Indonesia. that's
Absolutely.
that's that's my homework now. I got a 24-hour flight, plenty of time to read.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we'll be luckily like you guys in business class enjoying it. So that's
Took a long time to get there.
yeah, exactly. So we'll definitely be traveling in comfort with the neck pillow, the eye mask, compression socks, which I didn't know if I need those, and now I'm 30 to going on 33, and I do need those. I realized that when we are going to Greece. That's something that's needed. So it's yeah, those are the little things you learn when you do, and it makes it a lot more
Absolutely.
comfortable.
Every trip you learn something, hopefully.
Oh yeah, yeah, a lot, and you bring back some knowledge. Well, cool. Well, RC, I appreciate you coming on. I know you mentioned a lot of those places people can find you online. Cowboyproductions52.com is one of those. And then all your handles, which I'll share, all your social media handles, which I will share in the podcast show notes. And then if there's any books that you want to call out or highlight that your listener, that my audience can go take a look at, feel free to share those now.
Well, I have two books on Audible now. One is they're called Sunrise Sunset. It's a book of 10 short stories that take place in different locales. I have a second book, which is an Asian folk tale. It's called Kazu, son of Oshida Kamasaki. And it's a fun story about a feudal kingdom and some intrigue. I have several books on Amazon, detective novels, historical fiction novels. And I have a book called Grandpa Ernie's Secrets, which is a spy novel, takes place in Italy. I have a lot of historical sites there, and it's like going to Italy in my book. You'll see all those sites in my as you read my book. So check that out.
Yeah, no, those are pretty cool. I'm gonna have to go check it out myself. But I appreciate you coming on. Listeners, if you're coming back, you know that we like to share these episodes every week. Make sure that if this was valuable, you share it with a friend, family member, Give us a 5-star review if you think it deserves it. That way we can reach more people who are trying to travel. As well as if you're wanting to learn more, you can go to my website at itineraryboss.com. We have a free resource that will help you save $500, 5 tips to save $500 on your next trip. As well as if you want to sign up for our weekly email list that comes out each week. It's giving you valuable knowledge on each podcast episodes that's released each week. It'll have Spark Notes, also each blog post that comes out. So we're really delivering that with also different credit cards that are coming out that can help you travel and save a lot of money and use rewards. So go check those out. Looking forward to seeing you all next week. Again, RC, thanks for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. And looking forward to staying in contact. Hope you have a good
Thank you
rest of
for
your
the
day.
opportunity. Thank you
Yeah,
for the opportunity. I
absolutely.
really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks.